The 2025 Hyundai IONIQ 5 now has a rear wiper, which means it is finally capable of going off-road. So enter XRT, which stands for Extreme Rugged Terrain. The first E is silent. But it's a fresh take from Hyundai on taking a car we all know and love, apparently it's selling very well, the IONIQ 5, and making it more rugged, more off-road capable, think more rally. And they do this by adding a bit of a lift, some cool wheels, more off-road capable tires, more plastic cladding, off-road modes. Wait, they're not the first to do this.
This video is brought to you by Eaton. Eaton is a one-stop shop for implementing reliable and innovative EV charging infrastructure at your site. Across all applications, Eaton's EV charging infrastructure, hardware and software gives you the scalability, flexibility, and intelligence you need to charge today and scale up tomorrow. Learn more at eaton.com/EVCI. This video is also brought to you by IONIQ, North America's premier charging network. With unmatched commitment to elevating the customer experience, IONIQ is opening America's roads to all EVs, giving drivers the coverage they need, the reliability they deserve, and the amenities they crave.
So you know how the IONIQ 5 in blew pretty much everyone's minds and made even the EV haters kind of intrigued? Well, I was hoping this would be kind of that approach again, but like an off-road version. I'll be mentioning the Mach-E Rally a few times through this video in comparison because that is kind of the main competitor in this weird niche segment of soft road, almost rally capable CUVs. Although I don't think it should be that niche, because I think you should be able to do this because it's awesome. Why not be able to take an SUV off-road? Who would have thought? But this seems like a bit more of a conservative approach. The Rally's like the most expensive Mach-E. It is up there in price. It is kind of a Mach-E GT, but Rally-ified. This doesn't go quite that hard. This is not a IONIQ 5 in powertrain, although it does have the new battery and the new things from the 2025 IONIQ 5 in refresh. But this does take it a bit more conservatively with just the normal all-wheel drive drivetrain, which I still think is enough power, and we'll get into driving that in just a little bit here. I actually grabbed a white one because that's how you can tell the most differences stylistically, especially with the cladding. There's a few other colors over there, and there's other colors that will be coming that I'm really excited about, a new blue and a new red that are not even here, sadly. They're still finishing those up in the paint shop, I guess. But I'll at least show you what I can here today with this Hyundai IONIQ 5 XRT. But starting right off, I want to take you on a quick tour around the XRT, starting with this badge, or actually lack thereof. There is no physical badge, and this is because they are sustainable. So it's less sustainable to have a badge sticking onto the car. So instead they embossed it into the pixelated plastic cladding, which is kind of all over this thing. Curious what you guys think on that, but the front bumper especially, it almost looks like the bras that you would put on the cars back in the day. Some people still do that to protect it. This is actually functional, and I do actually like it. I know everyone's like, oh, it looks like a Subaru Solterra / Toyota BZ4X with all the cladding, but I think it's kind of cool. It does stand out dramatically on this white paint, which is partially why I grabbed this new matte white paint. But there are other options, as you can see over there, where the cladding is much less pronounced, and maybe that's the route to go. You can get grays, a lot of grayscale, or the red or blue, which of course the cladding would stick out on as well, but I grabbed white just so you could see all the differences. So this is the new cladding. It is pixelated. Hyundai is very obsessed with pixelation. You can see that in the headlights, which are the same as the outgoing model. You can see that in the little grille stuff in the front and the taillights. They're all pixelated, very retro, modern vibes. And that's intentional from Hyundai's point of view, because the definition of being pixelated means that they're looking at every pixel. That's their attention to detail. That's how they've described their pixelation approach. I think it is actually really nice because you see a lot of rock chips forming up here on non-cladded cars. Yes, rocks could still damage this, but rocks hitting this won't be quite as noticeable as rocks hitting white paint. So that kind of makes sense. You have all this pixelated stuff up here. These are active cooling shutters, and you have these functional recovery hooks, which I guess can support, of course, the weight of the car, but even a bit more. I think 5,800 pounds was the number I'd heard thrown around. So cool, red tow hooks so that you can be pulled out if you rally too hard. Then you have XRT badges on the wheels. These are new 18-inch wheels. They're kind of meant to look like a pixelated take on the classic Steely. They are, of course, not Steelies. They are alloys. But yeah, 18-inch. Looks pretty good on this car. The actual specs are 235/60 R18. So 235 is the same width as the 18-inch wheel on a Model 3, but the cross-section of 60 is definitely bigger. So not super wide, you still retain some efficiency. And these are the Continental Cross Contacts ATR tires. So that's the tire they chose, which is a bit more of an off-road capable, but not quite as hardcore as the rally tires we saw on the Mustang Mach-E Rally. So along with the black cladding, which is again pixelated on parts, not everything's pixelated. I think some people thought all of the black cladding would be, but down here below, there's no pixelation. It's kind of just in the middle section, also not in the top section. And then on the sides, there's also no pixelation. It just kind of starts at the actual wheel arches, which those look pretty similar to outgoing IONIQ 5s in certain trims. I mean, you can see over there the limiteds that we've been driving today. Those have kind of the body colored, but these over here, just all contrasting colored black plastic. It would have been cool, in my opinion, to see the pixelation extended in this roof spoiler situation, but alas, that is just kind of a piano black look. And that is leading down here into the wiper zone, which is nice. Actually, we were driving it up in the mountains in some rain earlier, not the XRT, the limited version. And the rear wiper really did come in handy. So they are listening to their customers. At least that's what they're telling me. We'll go into the interior in a little bit where they're making more changes to listen to the customers. But I want to talk about some of the specs as far as improvements for off-road capabilities beyond just the looks and the functional red tow hooks. 23 millimeters ground clearance lift. So it essentially is IONIQ 5 with a little bit of a lift kit. Nothing drastic, but the Mach-E notably had a 1-inch lift, but I think that was mostly for suspension travel because the effective ground clearance actually didn't really change on Mach-E. It was already 5.6 inches or something, and then it became 5.7 or 5.8. I've seen different numbers thrown around. Either way, Mach-E is, even the rally version, is under 6 inches of ground clearance, which is not very much. The IONIQ 5 normally has 6.1 inches. This is improved by 23 millimeters, so 0.9 inches. So now this is 7 inches in the XRT, which is pretty decent, but Subaru Solterra is 8.3 inches. Even the Mazda CX-30 has a bit more ground clearance, I think. So it's definitely not going to be class leading, but I don't know how much ground clearance you really need if you're driving high speed on this type of material. You also have an improved approach and departure angles. So the approach is now 19.8 degrees, which is up from the 17.5 previously. And the departure is 30 degrees, which is up from the 25.4 degrees. So minor, but still improvements. And they did that by, of course, adjusting the shape of the bumpers front and rear. To compare, the Mach-E is actually 16 degrees on the approach angle and 27.2 degrees on the departure angle, which is up from 15.4 and 25.7 degrees. So those are the differences there. I'm sorry, I have to use notes. There's a lot of measurements to remember. Then there's also the unique suspension tuning. So I don't know all the extreme differences in what the suspension's doing. I'm gonna try to find out some of those examples, but I guess probably softer rebound and adjustments for basically compromising for better off-road, smoother off-road with really intense, quick bumps. Which might just rattle your brains out in a normal IONIQ 5, and maybe this one handles it well. Jumping in the interior, you can actually see more XRT on the door cards, along with more of that pixelated stuff, which is nice. I really don't mind the door cards in this thing. Feels like very big doors, but they seem nice soft touch here. So a lot of the changes in the interior are pretty much in line with the 2025 mid-cycle refresh. It is very minor refresh, but it is still something. One of those refreshes was the fact that this has the bigger, now 84 kilowatt hour battery, up from the outgoing 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, which is nice. And there is only one way to get your XRT, and that is dual motor all-wheel drive. There's no rear wheel drive variation. There's no small battery variation. So it slots in the lineup below limited, but above SEL, and priced at $55,400, which appropriately puts it between SEL and limited all-wheel drive options. I guess I'll turn climate on in here. We'll do kind of low just so we have something. And I will use the now physical buttons to turn on my, oh, never mind. Okay, no ventilated seat in the XRT, which, surprises me. That would be a really nice feature to have in my opinion. But you have heated seats, heated steering wheel, parking, I guess, camera button, and also the parking button there. You do have the surround, which is nice, surround view camera. And yeah, HDA and stuff, you know, all that usual standard safety equipment is nice to have, and they do include that in here. Fun fact, these things on the steering wheel, 4 dots, which is actually the letter H in Morse code. That's a fun little Easter egg. They will show you your charging progress in case you want to look there instead of elsewhere on the car. And there's also a driver view monitoring thing here, which is really annoying. I don't know if you can turn it off. I haven't been able to figure out how to turn it off. If so, it is actually furiously obnoxious. There's a drive mode selector here, so you can tap between Eco, Normal, Sport, and My Drive. But what's new, as you can see on the screen, there's a terrain option, and you can access that through this button. So terrain mode then takes you into snow, mud, or sand. We will probably be using sand today if I had to guess. So that's where you can find the terrain, and then you can jump back to drive modes here. Otherwise, a lot of the same system as before, but it is technically the updated, I think CC&C is what it's called, Connected Cockpit Navigation Console, or maybe a CC&S system, I'm not sure. So it is slightly improved, but not amazing. It is a faster CPU, greater GPS accuracy. You now have wireless CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. And then Bose sound system is standard on the XRT, as is the active sound design, which should help with some of the NVH stuff. And you have your light that tells you when the 12-volt battery is being charged off the high voltage battery. Love that. I don't know why, I just like it. It's dumb, it's so dumb, but I love it. Then you have the wireless phone charger here. That's nice. The whole center console was changed just a little bit from the outgoing model, which I appreciate. And having the physical buttons, I also really appreciate. And I wish this was an actively cooled wireless phone charger. I wish it held your phone better. I wish it had MagSafe. I wish it was Qi 2. I think it is still only Qi 1, so it's only I don't know, 7.5 watts ish. Not a great way to charge your phone, honestly. But you have the little USB-C thing right there, and it's toggleable as before to do data and charging or just charging. Love that feature. It sounds so silly, but it's really a nice thing to have. So I use that fairly regularly because sometimes I don't want to use CarPlay. Even though it's wireless CarPlay now, I still tend to use wired. Then we have just some more storage down in here, a little bit more storage up here where they're hiding the key. I hate that key. I think it looks really ugly, but it is kind of cool that it is the Hyundai logo incorporated into a key. So I'll give them some credit on that. The rear seats largely, I think, unchanged, and no glass roof in XRT, but that I think kind of makes sense. There are some USB ports down there. But what's interesting is I couldn't actually measure the wattage of any of those because my Anchor power bank, which I usually charge things off of, wouldn't charge off of these USB ports. I'm not sure why. My phone charged fine, not fast, so I'm kind of guessing they're probably maybe 25 watts like the EV9. It's hard to say. So if I can find out exact numbers, I'll let you guys know. But otherwise, yeah, they just kind of, they work just fine. No real complaints there. So as far as the specs of the car itself, like I mentioned, the battery capacity is the improved 84 kilowatt hour battery. That should be nice to have, improving range just a bit on all models. This one is rated at 259 miles of range. Of course, when we can get one on our 70-mile-an-hour range test, we will test and find out exactly how far it goes, what the buffer below zero is, all that stuff. And when we charge it, we'll be using the NACS port. That's right. They've touted this as the first car with NACS. My understanding is that Gravity, technically by Lucid, was delivered earlier. But let's be honest, how many Gravities have actually been delivered? Not many. Whereas these are already piling through Hyundai dealerships. In fact, we've already done some testing with the 2025 IONIQ 5. We've done a range test. We've done a charging test, although it's a little quirky with the charging. We've found that the car doesn't actually precondition all the way to its optimal temperature. It gets you close, but we've had to like yo-yo the car, you know, heavy throttle, heavy braking region to get the car warm enough, I think optimally about 40 degrees Celsius, to get the optimal battery temperature, to get the optimal charging speed. It does precondition down to 10, maybe even below that. They said 10%, but I think we've seen it preconditioning even lower than 10%. And I've also heard there is manual preconditioning. So a lot more to test with this car. Of course, we can start using some from our local Hyundai. Shout out to Crossroads Hyundai that we've worked with in the past year. But it's cool that I'm out here really focusing on the XRT. I'm excited to see how this does off-road. I was at the Mach-E rally launch with Kyle. That was a lot of fun. But it just looks so cool, like coming down the road. Absolutely. I just love that. I don't know why. Something about, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Mach-E, admittedly. It's fine. But the Mach-E rally just opened this new sense of like, oh, I could see myself with this car, but it is expensive. So this one being a bit cheaper, it may not have the power of the IONIQ 5N. It may not have the power even of the Mach-E rally, but I'm still very intrigued, and I think this probably has enough power as is. We should talk power. It is 320 horsepower, 400 something pound-feet of torque. It's the same power as the outgoing models. That's why I'm not really focused on it. It's just the bigger battery that gives you more range and a faster peak charging. Apparently 300 or 257 kilowatts peak is what it's claiming. We'll of course be testing that as well. 10 to 80 in 20 minutes. Of course, on a Tesla supercharger, which now can have access to, 10 to 80 in about 30 minutes. In case you missed it, I actually filmed a video with the 2025 IONIQ 5. Our friend Corbin over on the Ionic Guy YouTube channel. I took my Model 3 on a Tesla supercharger versus his IONIQ 5 on a Tesla supercharger. Both cars preconditioned, and he won. 10 to 80 faster than me, and he only peaked at 123 kilowatts. Whereas I've been told this will actually do 135 kilowatts on Tesla superchargers. I haven't been able to see that yet on a V3. Maybe that was, I don't really know what caused that, but we had everything optimized as best as possible. So maybe that requires like a V4 cabinet. I'm not really sure. Either way, I'm really excited to see how this charges on Tesla V4 solutions when those actually really start rolling out. But I'm tired of walking around this thing. I just want to go drive it. So join me as we jump off-road. We're already off-road, but like more off-road. All right, I hopped in another color. It's the dark gray or light gray. I don't really know. They're all grays. The color choices on Ioniqs are interesting. I do like that they have matte paints. Matte paint is hard to take care of. Definitely check out out-of-spec detailing. Colton has done some stuff with IONIQ 5s, and we recently did one on, not this car, but the 2025 SEL is one that me and Colton did dig into a bit over on out-of-spec detailing. Looking here on the screen, I will now press terrain mode to toggle into snow, mud, and sand. And like I said, I will be doing sand mode. Pretty good temperatures out here, 69 degrees, very nice temperature. So what I'm going to do is set my phone on the wireless charger and just see how well it holds on. I think that'll be kind of hilarious. So I'm heading out now in sand mode. So my goal is to kind of see just what these modes do, if anything feels different or not. Because I'll try this course in sand mode, but also maybe a bit in normal mode, maybe sport mode, and see what difference I can actually tell. My driving position isn't quite perfect for what I'd want. The seat doesn't quite go low enough in pretty much any IONIQ 5. Steering wheel comes out okay, but I think I'd want to even out a little bit further. And so far I'm feeling definitely a lot of bumps. I don't think we're going to be seeing quite the magic of what the Mustang Mach-E Rally does. It's not quite the most fair comparison though, because the Mach-E Rally is, like I said, basically top of the line Mustang GT, but then go off-road. So it has Magna Ride, extremely magical suspension system, a technical term. Whereas this is just a different tuned suspension, but I actually haven't been able to figure out what exactly they've done. Hyundai didn't have anyone here on site to tell me exactly what the drivetrain calibration and suspension tuning was. All that they've said is it's different, and I haven't gotten any straight answers. So maybe I can jump on a podcast with them and figure out their progress and the development of this car, because it seems fun. Like, being on a development team for this seems like a dream job. Like, oh, I have to go out to the desert and rally around, and that's work? Cool. But we'll see how this feels when I get out on the course here. So we are out in the desert near Palm Springs. I don't know if I actually mentioned where I am, but I am, yes, near Palm Springs in California, which is a great hiatus from the horrible Colorado weather that we're dealing with back home. But let's try a quick launch here, shall we? Unfortunately, there is no way to override the paddle regen, so we are stuck at level 1 regen no matter what. But I guess I wonder if I could 2-foot launch. No launch control or anything. So I'm just gonna map the throttle and see what happens. Very gradual roll into it. There's no like quick torque off the line like you would expect launching an EV on tarmac, for example. It's sound calibration, honestly. It makes you roll into everything. Every maneuver is gradual and calibrated and calculated, which makes sense. Otherwise, you would literally regen so strong. Like, these cars have great regen in iPedal max mode, but that would just cause you to slip all the time when you're trying to slow down on regen. So as a sneak in here, very, very gradually. I'm almost gonna turn on the cameras just to see what I'm doing here. But honestly, the front camera coming up in terrain mode is really kind of cool, and it goes away very quickly. So you're not supposed to like really look at it while you're driving, but they kind of have us in a Jeep off-road course out here, and so we can kind of see how it handles little rocks. I mean, this is basically what I would consider the soft roading variant of the IONIQ 5. You could already soft road it in some places, but having these 18-inch wheels with the 60 thickness, that really helps you with the confidence going over some of these rocks. You're not quite worried about popping a tire as much as you would with, say, a limited IONIQ 5 with much thinner rubber on those bigger wheels. So that makes sense, and it also makes it a bit more comfortable. Like, your comfort when you're driving down the road, just in general, comes from both suspension tuning, but also technically the wheel and tire combo. I mean, how much tire do you have to help absorb some of those impacts? Definitely it kicks up a lot of dust. And now we have some deeper sand situations. So I'm gonna kind of let it get stuck here and see if I can gradually work my way out. And yeah, I mean, I can tell it's really struggling for traction, but it is finding it. And the one thing they do with all the off-road modes, well, I guess I should say terrain modes, regardless, is a 50-50 power distribution. That's maybe one complaint that perhaps they could add over software, but there is no drift mode like you would see with Cybertruck or Rivian Baja mode. Like, all you can do is your perfect 50-50 power split on all modes at all speeds. And technically that is the best for traction, but it's not the best for pure fun, which is slightly disappointing. But I won't really complain that much. As long as I can get where I want to go, that's probably what most people are worried about. But as someone who wants to have a little bit of fun, there's definitely a lot of limitations with, you just can't really slide this thing. It feels almost like understeery in some places, which kind of makes sense. So it's interesting that they have the power limited that way, because in theory that means even though the front motor is like 74 kilowatts, the rear motor can do 165 kilowatts. I guess that means you're limited to about 150 total kilowatts, because the front motor can only do the max it can do, and the rear motor will match it perfectly. So you definitely don't have the speed that you would find in the Mustang Mach-E Rally. So I have to say, so far, that car seems a bit more intriguing. But I will say there's some places on this course where I've found spots where the Mach-E probably would have scraped the front and rear because of the approach and departure angles, whereas this, having really pretty good approach and departure angles for what it is, means it has a bit of an edge in that case. Literally less of an edge because of the design of the car. And they can do that by stretching the wheelbase and having less of a overhang on the front and rear. So, I mean, it's old news at this point, but the IONIQ 5 does have a longer wheelbase than the Palisade, the 3-row SUV, which means the wheels all pushed out to the corners make it, yeah, more interior cabin space and also better approach and departure angles naturally. So the XRT feels like a natural extension of the IONIQ 5 lineup. I'd be really curious to see if Kia does anything like this, but they don't strike me as the off-road variant. Like an off-road EV6 sounds kind of strange, whereas the off-road IONIQ 5 almost makes sense. Like the IONIQ 5, when it came out, I was like, oh, that's like a Lancia Delta and a Grale, like perfect. Definitely found a busier portion of the track. There's a little bit of a kind of a one-way situation. We have to take turns while we're out here, but it's cool seeing the red tow hooks on the front of all these cars. Like, I actually really like how that's an accent, and they didn't lean too much into the red accents, but just a little bit, which is great. Jumping into sport mode, I just want to see how this feels, if it's really that different. So jumping onto this course here, we'll see. I mean, there's not really much to report right now. This just feels like a fire road in Colorado. I guess they could call it off-roading, and there is some steeper sand, but nice. Little bit of slippage there in sport mode. It's almost like sport mode's actually more fun off-road. But I do expect, like, maybe the really slow speed stuff. I wonder if this will give me, like, I wonder if this will let me lose traction. So if I just creep around here, I pedal max. So I'm going to ease my way through here. So far sport mode's doing everything. I'm sure there are little technical nuances in slow speed, maybe really, really thick sand, but I think naturally there's nothing here that would really push it that far. I still feel like this is the IONIQ 5 I would choose to buy if I did have any inkling of going off-road on fire roads or what have you. But unfortunately, the XRT does not have the glass roof, which I think is a really, really nice piece of the Limited. I will say, my phone has not fallen off the wireless charger, and it's still charging. And it's really funny over there seeing this little sign. That's really cute. Hyundai HQ and Hyundai headquarters in Savannah. So I feel like one of the major questions is, am I missing... Oh, wow. So I'm in iPedal Max, and it's really just like struggling to slow down, which makes complete sense. But it feels kind of a bit out of control. Like the region is just like, it's unsure of what to do, and it clearly isn't getting traction with the region, so it's kind of like freaking the car out a little bit. But then you go full send here, and yeah, it really does limit traction. So going back to terrain modes, to sand, it feels like you can actually go faster, even though it's technically less overall power. You still have, it's just tuning it to give you actually everything it can, whereas sport mode was like freaking out because you have no traction, so it's really cutting power even more. Trying to hit the brakes a little bit. It's just like ESP is working pretty constantly, slamming on the brakes. Wow, that's really, really pretty good. Pretty good. Ooh, a few whoopsies here. I'm glad the suspension is a bit softer, because otherwise you would be absolutely rattling your brains out. But it's definitely not that magic that Magnet Ride seems to have. Oh, and it's just like, you can really tell the weight of this car. I mean, having taken some much lighter weight, combustion cars off-road, when you switch to an EV and you try going, any sense of rallying, any bit of weight thrown around is very, very noticeable. And that's the challenge, I think, with rallying an EV. I mean, sometimes the weight oscillation is nice and fun, but all rallying really is just weight distribution on which axle and for which amount of power. And this is just a lot of weight shifting and shoveling itself around in the sand. Jumping back out on the track, just gonna give it a little bit of beans. It's nice. You really never feel out of control. Like, everything is really working nicely together, and I don't feel like the car is doing something unpredictable. That is a benefit of having the dual motor, all-wheel drive, 50-50 split. And there's a lot of subtle drivetrain calibration stuff happening. The throttle response is, I wish I knew exactly what they were doing with it, but no one could give me a straight answer. But it is better for sand, for lack of a better term. But it is a blast. Like, I could literally do this all day. Let me just navigate this really tight corner again. The ideology of having a car that can do this type of off-roading, or I should really say soft-roading as a Jeep owner, otherwise I'd get massacred by my own people. Doing this soft-roading and then also driving, of course, on the highway and getting, in theory, 3-something miles per kilowatt hour is nice. I mean, it's giving you that like Swiss Army knife vibe of this car can do anything I want it to do within reason, but like, that's kind of awesome. But again, that's why I think back to, oh, it'd be even more cool if they had just XRT-ified an IONIQ 5 in. That would have been really cool. Having the crazy street and actually trackability of the IONIQ 5 in and then being able to do this would be so cool. But of course, suspension tuned for track is completely different than suspension tuned for this or rally or off-roading of any kind. So I won't fault them too much. I really do think this is enough power. I think I'm curious, always curious what the other journalists are going to say. I'm having plenty of fun out here and only using, what would that be? 75 kilowatts, 150 kilowatts. So like, what is that? 230 horsepower? I don't know. That's really all you need, I think, if you're off-road, because you literally can't put all that power down. Oh yeah. Okay, that felt a little bit almost airborne. So within sand mode, and presumably the other modes, which I guess I could test now, you can do level 0 regen, so absolutely 0, or the default is level 1. So I'm just going to check. And if I go to mud mode, same situation, level 1 versus level 0, and in snow mode, same situation, level 1 or 0. So after you select the mode, you have no power to the pedal until you release the pedal completely and then put it back down again. Then you have power. Otherwise, it'll literally bring you to a stop even though your foot's on the accelerator. Super interesting. I feel like this is a riot, and I don't really have many complaints other than it feels like a little, like at times it feels like it's bottoming off against the bump stops and then you feel a little bit jarred, but at least the seat's comfortable. Coming back up on this hill, just gonna inch my way over it. It's so easy. Like the route they gave us, I'm pretty sure my Miata could do some of it, not all of it. All-wheel drive is obviously useful and maybe even necessary, but absolutely having a blast. Here's this nice British gentleman. I can't stop.
Well, you know the lay of the land by now.
Yep.
So I'll leave it to you.
Anyways, let me activate this rear wiper really quick to improve my rear visibility. That is fantastic. One of the best new features of the 2025 refresh. Everyone's all obsessed with having knacks, but can I just explain how important and nice that rear wiper is? We've entered the track. Let's go play. Skirt! Deep sand. And coming up to the next corner. send it. I'd be really interested to see what the rest of this business is. Like, it's like a Jeep off-road business, and I'd love to actually try that out. So it got a little bit of oversteer there, which is nice, but in general, it seems like a bit understeery, and maybe part of that is just the weight as you're coming around a corner, and then you only having the 50-50 power distribution, and you can't adjust that. So that's one, I'd say, minor complaint. It's really not a major complaint. Like, I feel like the calibration feels pretty nice and pretty sort of what most anyone would possibly want, but it would be a lot of fun to throw more power on the rear axle because it has it. I mean, they're not using the same motor on both axles. Wow. ESP really grabbed right there. That was really interesting. But I didn't feel out of control. Like, it felt like the car just like knew what to do. So I'm thoroughly impressed with the sand calibration and just having a riot on this little, I could do this loop all day. Full brakes, driving around, okay. So now that I've done a couple loops with sand mode, I do want to test and see what would it do just over in normal mode. Like, let's say you just suddenly find yourself in sand and you're so taken aback and you forget that you're driving the XRT. Now we have normal mode. Same region level though. I'm going to stick with the level 1 region and just see how well this works. So it's definitely limiting power a bit more and freaking out a bit more if I hit a corner and don't have the traction necessary to accomplish it. But otherwise, really feels pretty similar. But it feels like it's trying to throw more power than it can use and then cutting its own power. So it's like, in theory, you'd have this perfect car which had no drive modes. It just completely adapts to whatever environment you have. But I'm not feeling much of a difference with normal. The big difference is you can't force it past level 1 regions. So now that I'm in normal mode, I can't. So now we have iPedal Max. Sending it off the throttle, it's bringing it to a stop gradually, but throwing it around a corner with some region. See, I actually kind of like some of the extra region, although it is unpredictable. It is kind of nice to just do the one pedal situation over and over and over again. But yeah, it's really, when you have some sort of lock in the steering, that's when the power really seems to be cut a bit more in normal mode versus the actual sand. So jumping back to terrain mode, back to sand, that's where it feels a lot more fun. You could even do the 2-foot driving situation if you really wanted, but hopping around here, oh yeah, this is a blast. I could do this all, most people are coming out here doing 1 lap and I'm like, excuse me, do you mind if I just keep going? I still have my genuine complaints though of the not being able to creep and do reverse and drive. You have to literally put your foot on the brake, then go to reverse or drive, and that's how it works. That's a lot of time driving in the dirt. No complaints. Really seems like a fun, pretty well sorted car. I'll give my final thoughts here in a bit, but I just initially, I was kind of wishing I had Magnet Ride that whole time. I was kind of wishing I had the Mustang Mach-E Rally tires. Those Cross Climate 2, I think is what those are. Really cool, they look cool, and they seem super effective. These are fine, but like, I just like the look of the other tires better, and may as well give me a tire that looks good. But I really don't feel like you need more power, which is interesting. I think I came into this wondering if I'd miss the extra substantial amount of power that the Mach-E Rally has, or even the IONIQ 5N. But off-road, where it's hard enough to put that power down, I really don't think you need any more. This is fine. And if it really is 50-50, that means this is like 200 something horsepower, which is not a lot in the EV standards of today, but I am pretty thrilled. Here's side by side really quick, in case anyone was curious, of the Limited in this case versus the XRT. So looking at the front fascia, extremely different actually. Obviously headlights and up about the same, except the XRT does get the blacked out emblem, which does look pretty nice. And you can see even side by side of the wheels, the 18 inches over on the XRT, and I forget what's on the Limited, the 20 inches over here. So 255, 45, 20, 235, 60, 18. So narrower effectively. The tow hooks, of course, stick out like I don't want to say sore thumb. I actually really do like them. And I like that the red breaks up all of the black. And then you can see all the cladding, all the pixelation here versus the kind of jutted, almost blade design here. And the cladding on the side, I mean, this used to be black. Now it's kind of tan because I've been hooning it in the desert. Versus the really clean silver there. Now, SEL does do it a bit differently, but the Limited having the silver accents is very nice. Then we can see on the back here as well, you can just tell how the XRT sits a little bit higher than the Limited. And you can see the tires are a bit narrower, in fact. And you can see how the bumper is improved for that departure angle. So that's a really quick side-by-side. It is wild how high the cladding comes up here versus over there. The bumper really does cut off right there. And otherwise, pretty similar. It's still IONIQ 5 after all. But curious what you guys think of the new 2025 wheel design, as well as, of course, the XRT wheel design. I really do like the XRT wheels. I think if I was to buy one, I would take an XRT, make it even more Lancia Delta Integrale, and that'd be the day. Black mirrors, the spoiler is also fully blacked out up here versus this being a bit more gray, I guess, grayscale. So there you go. Those are all the differences, but it's just like really funny to see that car and this car, and they are the same family, but quite different, especially in person. Striking difference. Either way, I'm sure glad they saved the earth by not putting a badge on the back, because that really improves sustainability. Yeah, it's important. It's important stuff, guys. So there you have it. A nice little adventure with the I almost called it the Subaru. All that cladding really threw me off. Oh my gosh. A nice little adventure with the Hyundai IONIQ 5 XRT. Extreme, rugged terrain. Curious what you guys think of this thing. Is it that much of a competitor to the Mach-E Rally? It is very similar in a lot of ways, but a little bit smaller wheels, a little bit less power, a little bit less price. But the Mach-E Rally has underbody protection under the motors, for example. This does not, but they didn't deem that that was necessary. I wonder if the Mach-E Rally really needs that. Maybe it does. Maybe it's a different class of car. I'm not really sure what you call it exactly, but I'm intrigued. I like this trend of making CUVs actually functional off-road, which is funny because that's the original marketing for CUVs was like, hey, you know, your sedan that can't really go off-road? Well, here's something that can. And now people just use them as mall crawlers. IONIQ 5, I think, is a really interesting car. I've always liked it. And now I love seeing the XRT as another option. I will say the cladding, I think, looked a bit weird on the internet or on paper, but in person, it doesn't bother me as much, but it is pretty crazy on the white ones. I do prefer it, I think, on the, not even this gray. This gray also makes it look a little weird, but I prefer it on the dark gray or the dark blue, like different colors that hide some of the cladding, but I love the functionality of the cladding. I love the functionality of it being lifted. I like all of it. And what's the range impact, you might ask? Well, like I mentioned earlier, 259 miles is the EPA rated range, whereas this Limited is 269 miles. So very minimal impact despite the tires, despite the lift, despite the changes. So if we find out more information, such as really precise drivetrain calibration, suspension tuning, what they did exactly, I'll let you know. But all they were able to say here is just that there is improved suspension tuning for off-road. And there are, obviously with these drive modes, better calibration for sand, snow, mud. So there you go, the XRT. What do you think? Cheers.